Morning. Good to see everyone here today. As you can tell, there's been quite a bit of work took place since Wednesday night. So if you have any young folks, but we do that a lot of times. We think that Vacation Bible School is just for young folks. We've got classes for all ages. We're going to have adult classes on down. So be sure and try to be back tonight, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday nights. Okay? We are in Matthew, the 26th chapter this morning. Matthew, the 26th chapter. Last week we talked about Jesus telling Peter that he would deny him, and then Peter saying, you know, I even if I have to die for you, I will not deny you. So let's look there in verse 36 of chapter 26 of Matthew. Then Jesus came to them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." And he took with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee. We went through this last week, but I'm just kind of recapping. Just two sons of Zebedee, and began to grieve and distress. And he said to them, "My soul is deeply grieved to the point of death. Remain here and keep watch with me." And he went a little beyond them and fell on his face and prayed, saying, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." And he came to the disciples and found them sleeping, and said to Peter, "So you men could not keep watch with me for 1 hour? Keep watching and praying, that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." He went away again the second time and prayed, saying, "My Father, if this cannot pass away unless I drink it, your will be done." Again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. And he left them again and went away the third time and prayed, saying the same thing once more. Then he came to the disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up and let's go. Let's be going. Behold, the one who betrays me is at hand." You know, we can get a mental picture of this, and we can understand the disciples. I mean, you've got to remember, they've been through a lot up to this point. And here Jesus just wanted them to stay with them for 1 hour. They couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. They fell asleep. He came back, 3 times, and they were still sleeping each time. They did not grasp the severity and the seriousness of what's getting ready to take place. They just couldn't. Here Jesus told them he's getting ready to be betrayed. This is getting ready to happen. As we go into verse 47 now. While he was still speaking, behold, Judas, one of the 12, came up and accompanied by a large crowd with swords and clubs, who came from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now he who was betraying him gave them a sign: "Whomever I kiss, he is the one. Seize him." And immediately Judas went to Jesus and said, "Hail, Rabbi," and kissed him. Okay, we all know that Jesus knows the mind of all. Okay, we know that. We know he knew what was getting ready to happen. Okay? We know that. And here he knew that Judas had gave the sign whenever he was kissed. That's the one. I want you to look at Jesus' response in verse 50. And Jesus said to him, "Friend, do what you have come for." Would you call Judas a friend, knowing what he's doing? He knew it, yeah. If, yeah. But I think the frame there that we see when he says, "Friend, do what you have come for." Did you see any fight in Jesus at this point? When you see people coming with swords and clubs, knowing what they're coming for, and that's your response, "Friend, do what you've come for." That would be the furthest thing from my mind. What do we usually want to do? We want to stand up and fight, or do we run, or what's going to happen? That's not what Jesus done. If not, that's right.
He meant it.
He meant it. That's what I'm saying. It just look at the frame of mind of Jesus here is what I wanted you to think about. It's just something completely different than what we would encounter as humans. We just wouldn't think about doing this. Now in verse 51, right after they said, they came and laid hands on Jesus and seized him. Is this the first time that's happened in all of Jesus' ministry? That they've laid hands on him and seized him? The first time. First time. My question is, a lot of these people knew who Jesus was. Why did he have to give them a sign? Just a thought. I don't know. Now verse 51. And behold, one of those who were with Jesus reached and drew out his sword and struck the slave of the high priest and cut off his ear. Did you think about that? Did you think about that? It says one of the people that were with Jesus reached and drew out his sword and cut off the slave's ear of the high priest.
Weren't they Roman soldiers?
Now let's we have to remember in the New Testament. This is a prime example. Prime example. In the New Testament, how many accounts are there of Jesus' crucifixion? How many accounts? There's the Gospels. There are 4. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. 4 accounts. Each one, if you just left it right here, you'd say, man, they cut off his ear and left. Because Jesus says nothing more about it until he just says, put back your sword. Okay? Let's look in the book of Mark. We're going to get 4 different accounts, but you're going to get a bigger picture. This is a prime example of when you study the scriptures, there's more than just one verse in it. You need to research it out just a little bit. Let's look in Mark, the 14th chapter. Mark, the 14th chapter, and verse 47. But one of those who stood by drew his sword and struck the slave of the high priest and cut off his ear. It just left it like it did in Matthew. But now let's look over in Luke. Luke 22, verse 50. Luke 22, verse 50. And one of them struck the slave of the high priest and cut off his ear. But Jesus answered and said, stop, no more of this. And he touched his ear and healed him. Touched his ear and healed him. Would that not have just shocked you right there if you was with these people? Because they seen what happened. They seen what happened, and Jesus healed him right there. Now let's look over in the book of John. You would think, yeah. Luke 18. John 18, excuse me. John 18, verse 10. Okay. After reading these three, we know that the slave had his ear cut off, and now we know that Jesus has healed it and put it back. Okay? We know that. Now let's look in verse 10. Simon Peter, then having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's slave and cut off his right ear. And the slave's name was Malchus. So now we know it was Peter that cut off his ear, and it was his right ear. Yeah, that's right. Right ear, and his name was Malchus. Now, if we just read that over in Matthew, we wouldn't have known all that, would we? All we'd have known was he got his ear cut off and they went on. As it said, he didn't say anything about healing them in Matthew. So that's something that we need. This is a prime example of you get more each time from each account. Okay? Okay. Yes.
Before you go on, I think somebody asked if this was Roman soldiers. It's my understanding it's the guards associated with the chief priest.
Yeah, that's the way it is right now. They're going to hand them over after the trial to the Romans. I'm sorry, David. I should have addressed that.
And as far as Judas kissing Jesus, and Jesus spent lots of time talking to the upper echelon of the Jewish leadership.
Yeah.
He has criticized those individuals very harshly. But this group that has came to get Jesus isn't that upper group.
No.
These are the underlings.
Yeah. They're lieutenants, we might say.
These are those
Yeah.
that are getting paid by the high priest.
That's true.
So they're going to do whatever, even though that ear got cut off. You know, the whole thing is we can't let Jesus do this, or we're losing our place.
That's right. You have to give an account, won't they? That's right.
You know, and I've often thought about this aspect of Judas kissing Jesus. Well, this band of people that came after him, they don't have pictures of what Jesus looked like.
And we have to remember, this was at night.
At night.
This was at night. They didn't have street lights. They was carrying probably torches with fire on it, I figure.
They may have needed somebody to identify.
That's very possible. You take all that into consideration and you can kind of see more of it. Yeah. Yeah.
John also gives a fuller explanation of what Jesus, the conversation Jesus had.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So if you want to kind of get a bigger picture of the crucifixion and what led up to it, go to all four accounts and read that. And that way you can get, because Luke, what was Luke's profession? Physician, yeah, doctor. So he's going to give you a little bit more detail than some. And then there's John. He gave more of a detail than others because he told you what ear, the name, the who done it, and what the man's name was. Okay? So it's just something that we need to consider as we study the Scriptures. Now in verse 52. Then Jesus said to him, "Put your sword back in its place, for all those who take up the sword shall perish by the sword. Or do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and that he at once might put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? How then will the scriptures be fulfilled, which say it must happen this way? What's he trying to explain to Peter here? What's he trying to tell him? It's got to be. It's got to be this way.
It's got to fulfill what was prophesied.
I mean, don't you... We all probably get mad enough we'd bring down them angels. But Jesus is looking at the big picture. He's looking out for us. Because without him fulfilling the scriptures, we would be lost.
Well, if he didn't, then I might have punished the whole world.
Yeah, we wouldn't have any hope, would we? No hope. Verse 55 now. And at that time Jesus said to the crowds, have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me, as you would against a robber? Every day I used to sit in the temple teaching, and you did not seize me. But all this has been taking place to fulfill Scripture of the prophets. Then all the disciples left him and fled. At this point, Jesus is what? Alone. Alone. Evidently, he had seen some of these people before, Leland. Because he said, I've been in the synagogue, I've been in the temple, and you didn't seize me there. But after his disciples left, verse 57, those who had seized Jesus led him away to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were gathered together. They were sitting there waiting on him. Sitting there waiting on him. But Peter was following him at a distance, as far as the courtyard of the high priest, and entered in, and sat down with the officials to see the outcome. The chief priest and the whole council kept trying to obtain false testimony against Jesus, so that they might put him to death. They did not find any, even though many false witnesses came forward. But later on, two came forward and said, this man stated that I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days. And the high priest stood up and said to him, do you not answer? What is this that these men are testifying against you? But Jesus kept silent. And the high priest said to him, I adjure you by the living God that you tell us whether you are the Christ, the Son of God. And Jesus said to him, you have said it yourself. Nevertheless, I tell you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power of God and the coming on the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest tore his robes and said, he has blasphemed. What further need do we have of witnesses? Behold, you have heard the blasphemy. What do you think? And they said, he deserves death. What is the purpose of him tearing his robe? What does that symbolize?
What, just made him mad?
Anger? I think anger is part of it.
Distress.
Yeah, there you go. Distress. You know, you stop and think about this. They accused Jesus of blasphemy, and what did he say? What did he say? You have said it yourself. Nevertheless, I will tell you, hereafter the Son of Man will be sitting at the right hand of the power and the coming on the clouds of heaven. He asked him, are you the Son of God? Are you the Christ? And he says, as you have said. When we hear the term blaspheme, what does that mean? What does that entail to us? We don't use that term much today. What does that mean? When they accused him of blaspheme, what does that mean?
Does it mean putting yourself equal with God?
Yeah, basically. You know, we sometimes don't think about it, but that is talking against, you know. When it says blaspheme against the Holy Spirit, what is that? Is that one of the unforgivable sins? Blaspheme against the Holy Spirit? That means you have nothing to do with it. You don't accept it.
I thought it meant denying Christ.
Denying, yeah. At that point, they're accusing him of denying God. He's putting himself equal with God. That's what they're accusing him of.
A lot of that is Jewish tradition.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah. It is. So you can see this. And I've heard this question asked. Did Jesus receive a fair trial? You talk about one that's rigged. He had one that's rigged, wasn't it? This right here was set against. This was just a mockery. This was just to get the end result. And they'll say, well, he had a trial. Well, he came before.
Well, it was a mockery all the way.
It was a
That's
mockery
where the
all the way
authorities
through.
Come in because he said he was king, they were going to give him a crown.
That's right. That's right.
This was their pilot.
It-
Mark their end.
Exactly.
He was
So here he said, they answered, he deserves death.
the preacher.
He deserves death.
Linear. Yeah.
Verse 67 now.
Hey, Phil,
Yes.
what figures into this as well as what we sometimes describe as the mob,
Mentality. Yeah.
you know, because one person says it and another person capitalizes on that and takes it another step and so forth.
Exactly.
And, you know, in a broader sense, that's a lot of what happens with Christianity today is that one person speaks against it and then someone else jumps on that and, you know, just takes it to another level.
You know, that mob mentality, that happens all the time right now, doesn't it? Not necessarily in the church, but in the world. You can see when a protest starts in the streets, what's the first thing they want to start doing? Busting windows out and tearing stuff up. Why is that? Mob mentality. They get started, well, they don't know when to quit.
Well, and also they start with 3 or 4 and then.
It just keeps-
Within an hour.
It just
there
keeps
might be
building.
Hundreds or even thousands.
That's right. That's right.
It's cowardice too.
It is. It is. Yeah.
They wouldn't do that by themselves.
Right. That's,
And if you notice, most of that's always done at night, hoping nobody's seen them. Let's look at verse 67 now, continuing on. After they say he deserves death. Then they spat in his face and beat him with their fists, and others slapped him. And say, prophesy to us, you Christ. Who is the one who hit you? Just let that soak in a little bit, what they're doing here. They spit in his face. They beat him with their fists and slapped them. Then they're mocking him. Prophesy to us. Tell us who hit you. How many of us could sit there and take that?
Well, the thing you should go to the police.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let them handle it.
But just stop and think about the things right here. I mean, this is little stuff compared to what he's getting ready to suffer. But how many of us would take this right here? Somebody spit in your face, boy, that's the closest thing to getting in trouble right there. There's not many of us could just take that, let alone getting slapped and hit. Now, Peter was sitting outside the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him and said, "You too were with Jesus the Galilean." But he denied it before them all, saying, "I do not know what you are talking about." 1. When he had gone out into the gateway, another servant girl saw him and said to those who were there, "This man was with Jesus the Nazarene." And again he denied it with an oath, "I do not know this man." 2. And a little later the bystanders came up and said to Peter, "Surely you too are one of them, for even the way you talk gives you away." Then he began to curse and swear, "I do not know him." And immediately the rooster crowed. 3 times he denied Jesus. Last time he got serious, didn't he? Started cursing, swearing, "I do not know the man." And immediately the rooster crowed. And Peter remembered the word which Jesus said to him, "Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." And he went out and wept bitterly. Jesus was the one that said, "Man, I'll die for you, Jesus, before I do that." 3 times he denied not knowing Jesus before the rooster crowed, and he knew exactly then what Jesus said. Some of the other Gospels, they said that he looked toward Jesus and Jesus was looking right at him when he done it.
But there's 10 that aren't even there to deny it.
That's right. They've left. They ran scared, didn't they? That's true. We're going to stop right there, and we'll take up with chapter 27 next week. Thank you for your comments.
Hey, Phil,